Unfortunately, this video might bore some of you, because it is going to make me sound a lot like a broken record in some instances. As you can see, just judging by the title, it addresses one topic in particular that keeps cropping up on my channel, and that is homosexual and transgendered rights, specifically their right to marry. Once upon a time, I made a video called Treatise on Homosexual Rights, which is linked in the description down below. But upon coming across some new and rather interesting variations of those old tired arguments, I just decided to make another video to address those particular arguments in question. The first argument I hear is too common, unbelievably so, to the point where I think it is probably the dumbest of all of the arguments. And yet, anti-gay marriage proponents, anti-homosexual parties, family values advocates, and the like seem to repeat this like it's the best thing since sliced bread, and that is, homosexuality isn't unnatural. So, why is this wrong? Well, for one, we have and continue to observe homosexual behavior in many animal species. We really have to wonder in this case what the person making this claim refers to when they mean by something that's natural versus unnatural. After all, we live in the natural world, and technically everything that we can observe and quantify could be considered part of the natural world. Therefore, homosexual behavior is perfectly natural. But if the person making this claim is suggesting that this behavior is created by man and it is indicative only of mankind, first of all, as I've proven before, that's not true. But second of all, then technically religions, clubs, social parties, and anything of that sort would be considered unnatural by all stretches of the imagination. So, should we ban those as well just because they're unnatural? Argument number 2 says that gay marriage will confuse gender roles. Gender roles are, of course, behaviors and thoughts and actions attributed to a certain gender, meaning that girls tend to only do this thing and guys tend to do only this thing. And we come across it all the time in media and just in everyday life in general. But gender roles are entirely subjective, and it is really up to the couple in this case whether or not they want to even apply the concept of gender roles. I know that in my family, the traditional role of my father being a breadwinner and my mother being like a housewife definitely doesn't apply. My mother and my father are pretty much equal in terms of power in the household. So, would that suggest that my family is somehow inferior to everyone else's? Or does that suggest that because my parents decide to share an equal role in terms of responsibilities in their relationship, that they should not be allowed to marry? The next argument is that we must preserve traditional marriage between one man and one woman. It's the way it's always been, and it's the way it should always stay. I remember addressing Bristol Palin on this very concept, because, for one, marriage has not always been one way, because at one point it was illegal for a man of white descent and a woman of colored descent, or a woman of white descent and a man of colored descent to marry. That was at one point illegal. Are you going to suggest that just because it was always between one white man and one white woman that we should not allow colored people to marry? People really have to understand that keeping to tradition and arguing from tradition are really just a non-starter in terms of trying to make a point. Marriage is a sacred institution is the next argument on this list, to which I retort by saying that I currently don't believe in a God. I don't think I ever will again believe in a God. But even if I did again believe in a God, I think that people should have the right to marry whoever they want to, as long as they are informed and are able to make that decision, and that both parties are consenting and happy. That's it. And you know what? I don't give a shit what your God or any other God says otherwise. To me, that's like saying that Batman doesn't like gay marriage. Well, Batman doesn't exist in the real world as a real person, and to me, neither does your God. So, even if your God does exist, I really couldn't care. Gay people cannot have children and therefore should not be allowed to marry. Well, that would assume that we only marry for purposes of procreation, which I know many couples, gay and straight, who do not marry just to have children. And of course, may I also add that infertile couples and the elderly are still allowed to marry. So, are we going to take away their rights too? Homosexual couples tend to have higher rates of STDs being transmitted from one partner to another than heterosexual couples, to which I say, then you'd be against the STD, not the couple. Because in that case, why don't we just stop all sexuality in general? After all, I am not very sexually active, so I would technically have a much lesser chance of transmitting an STD or receiving an STD from someone than someone who is, say, sexually active, regardless if they were straight or gay. So technically, I could just use that argument against all straight people who are sexually active and say that, well, you have a higher rate of transmitting STDs than me, you're not allowed to marry. Our penises were designed to fit inside a woman's vagina and not anywhere else, to which I say, well, design is subjective. First of all, it is not something objective, it is purely and utterly subjective because it is based on what we perceive as patterns in nature. But even if it were objective, and even if it were true that our penises were designed to fit inside a woman's vagina, then anti-gay proponents would probably be against anal sex and oral sex and hand jobs and the like. So anything aside from vaginal sex should be something that anti-gay proponents are fighting against. But you don't hear that from them, do you? All you hear is them complaining about how they don't want to see two men fucking, or how they don't want to see two women having sex, or how they don't want to see some transgender people getting in on it. So it really doesn't make sense. But studies have shown that heterosexuals are better than homosexuals, whether it's regard to parenting or marriage success or things like that. Because quite frankly, a lot of these studies, I won't say all, but a good majority of them are funded by anti-gay organizations to begin with. So it's already biased from the get-go. Not to mention that a lot of them have methodology flaws, and are at times just downright disingenuous with regards to how they conduct their research. Besides, how does one exactly measure the success of a marriage or the success of parenting? A lot of it's very subjective. It's hard to objectify the success of a marriage or the success of raising children. So, when you have an already biased ideology influencing already biased people to do an already biased study, what makes you think that you're going to get anything out of this remotely resembling something fair? But even if I were to grant that gay couples were, on average, less successful than straight couples, or that gay couples cannot raise children as well as straight couples, so what? What does that prove at all? How on the earth does that somehow lead to the conclusion that we should deny people a basic right? I mean, I'm sure you could find statistics somewhere that on average a certain race of people might have a more successful marriage rate than another race of people, or maybe something like maybe atheists might have a more successful marriage rate than Christians. Should we stop all Christians from marrying then? Doesn't really make sense when it comes to that. So, okay, I'll grant that gay people are horrible parents and maybe their relationships aren't as strong as straight people's. That doesn't mean we should deny them their right to marry. Nobody has the right to redefine marriage. Or, on another variation of this, being that why should we cater to the minority? After all, it's not like gay people take up the majority of the world. First of all, yeah, I'm allowed to redefine marriage if a lot of people agree with me. That's part of living in this country, that we are allowed to change certain definitions in law. As for why we should not cater to the minority, by that definition, why do we have to cater to any minority at all? You know, why should we cater to racial minorities? Why should we cater to people like the handicapped and the elderly? Why should we help them if the rest of us are more powerful and more plentiful than the minority? Just because we are the majority does not necessarily mean that we have the right to take away basic rights from the minority. The next is another one I hear very often. Why is it so important for gay people to get their rights to marry? Why can't we just call it civil union? Well, why can't we just call straight marriages civil unions? Why don't we just call all minority marriages civil unions? We don't have to cater to every single minority group here in North America, do we now? Thankfully, though, at least where I live, we do recognize gay marriage. Why? It's not because we're putting them up on a pedestal as if gay marriage was somehow better than straight marriage. It's because we're treating them like human beings for once. You know, we're giving them the equal rights that everyone in the country should have. It's a step in the right direction, and of course, where I live, there are people who do discriminate, but we're getting there, and hopefully everyone else will get there as well. Here's one I heard more recently. There are two sides to this very controversial topic of gay marriage. Why can't we just come to a compromise, like civil unions? Well, why can't we just compromise everyone's right to vote, for that matter? Why don't we just compromise the minority's right for something else? We don't compromise human rights. You either are for equality and therefore are for gay marriage, or you are against gay marriage and you are against equality, and in my opinion, you are an asshole if you are the latter. Here's one I hear kind of often as well, is that gay rights are just the new in thing. It's like music and art and oh wait, no it's not. Because think about it. Are women's rights just a new in thing? Well, no, they aren't, because back then was when women's rights really started to kick up with women's suffrage and the right to be treated equally. And even today, women are still fighting for their right to be heard in certain things like the workplace, etc. And even if it was just a passing fad, why does that make it any less valid? I mentioned before that one of the arguments was that gay couples cannot raise children, but a slight variation of that would be that people are concerned for the impact of gay marriage on schools and school children. Well, this, I think, has to be one of the more disingenuous ones. You cannot make this argument without honestly lying to yourself. There is zero evidence that gay marriage would harm society and completely lead to the breakdown of everything as we know it. And, well, think of the children. Well, where I live, gay marriage is perfectly legal, and not only legal, but accepted. Socially accepted in many parts. It's not crumbled to the ground yet. Are you gonna wait another 100 years and hope that it crumbles to the ground? Well, don't hold your breath. Actually, please do hold your breath. Hold your breath until every single one of those countries which has legalized gay marriage officially crumbles legally, socially, economically, etc. Oh, here's one that's way too common as well. Well, if we allow gay marriage, what's to say we can't allow incest or bestiality or any other form of marriage with an inanimate object? This, of course, is disingenuous on more than one front. The first way it's disingenuous is that it does imply, with the way that it's more often than not phrased, that homosexual relationships are solely grounded in homosexual sex, which is, of course, very much untrue. I mean, how would you like it if you want to marry someone and someone decided to compare your marriage to just sex with having animals or sex with children or sex with inanimate objects? That's pretty damn insulting, isn't it? Second would be, what on earth does two consenting people who are both old enough to make that decision and old enough to understand the responsibilities involved with marriage, what does that have to do with marrying parties that aren't consenting, like inanimate objects or animals, or yes, even children? Ooh, here's one specifically targeted to the religious members in my audience. Gay marriage will cause the destruction of church and our religion. You're right. That's exactly what gays are doing. They're actually just secret atheists, and this is just a very cleverly disguised plan to destroy churches and all religions across the earth, so that we may propagate schools with anti-religious teachings and atheistic doctrines. And, so we can set fire to the rest of the world and eat babies and speak satanic verses in the comfort of our bedrooms. Oh yeah, and while we're at it, we can have some very kinky gay sex. Gay marriage caused blank, and this blank could be anything from 9/11 to Hitlerism, etc. And yes, both of these have been used by very largely revered political figures. To which I retort by saying, the next time someone can show me proof of a gay mafia or an underground gay organization hell bent on destroying the world and replacing it with gayness, then please let me know. Okay, so anyone who feels that I have missed a certain argument, feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. Thanks for sticking with me. I know it was a very long video, and I hope you all have a great day. May the truth always be heard.